Tensions between the United States and Canada have been intensifying, escalating into a full-scale trade battle with each side imposing new tariffs in response to the other. In a surprising turn of events, Ontario Premier Doug Ford decided to revoke a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S., a decision that wasn't made lightly. This move came shortly after President Donald Trump increased tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel to 25%, and Ford's intention was clear: to ease tensions and open the door for renewed dialogue between the two nations. Ironically, Ford had only recently introduced the electricity surcharge as a direct countermeasure to Trump's tariff plans. This additional charge specifically targeted states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, where power prices were expected to surge, potentially adding about $100 to the average household's monthly electricity bill and draining approximately $400,000 from each state's economy every day. However, rather than backing down, President Trump doubled down. In retaliation, he declared that tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum wouldn't just remain at 25% but would instead be doubled to 50%. This unexpected move sent shockwaves through financial markets and heightened fears of a full-blown trade war. The immediate impact was felt on Wall Street, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunging nearly 600 points before recovering slightly to close down 478 points, or 1.1%. This decline followed another significant drop of 900 points just the day before. The S&P 500 also fell by 0.7%, while the Nasdaq Composite slipped by 0.2%, reflecting growing investor anxiety over the escalating trade conflict and its broader economic implications. Concerns about a potential recession began to spread, leaving businesses and investors alike on edge. Behind the scenes, Doug Ford engaged in high-stakes negotiations with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, aiming to defuse the escalating trade dispute before it spiraled out of control. Described as productive by both sides, the meeting ultimately prompted Ford to take a bold step. He decided to pause the electricity surcharge imposed on U.S. states. This wasn't just about electricity costs, it was a diplomatic gesture, signaling that Canada was ready to de-escalate and return to the negotiating table. The impact of Ford's decision was immediate. Trump, who had just announced plans to double tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel, unexpectedly reversed course. Instead of raising them to 50%, he opted to keep them at the original 25%, illustrating how rapidly these trade policies were shifting and how actions taken even at the provincial level could significantly influence international relations. Canada, however, wasn't sitting idle. In response to the U.S. tariffs, Canada imposed its own set of retaliatory measures, introducing 25% tariffs on nearly $30 billion worth of American goods. The list of targeted products was extensive, covering everything from steel and aluminum to electronics, sports equipment, and cast iron products. As tensions mounted, Canada's incoming Prime Minister, Mark Carney, made his stance clear. While he expressed openness to meeting with President Trump, he insisted that any negotiations must respect Canada's sovereignty and result in mutually beneficial agreements. Carney emphasized the importance of repairing the economic and security relationship between the two nations, believing that with the right approach, they could overcome these disputes and strengthen their long-standing alliance. Just as it seemed that talks were taking a more constructive turn, Trump made a proposal that caught everyone off guard. He suggested that the simplest solution to the trade disputes would be for Canada to become the United States' beloved 51st state, claiming this would eliminate tariff battles overnight. The reaction from Canadian leaders was swift and unequivocal. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau dismissed the idea outright, stating, "There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would ever become part of the United States." Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre echoed these sentiments, declaring that Canada will never be the 51st state. "We are and always will be a strong, independent, and sovereign nation." The annexation idea was not only rejected by politicians but also overwhelmingly unpopular among the Canadian public. Recent polls indicated that a staggering 90% of Canadians oppose the notion of joining the U.S., underscoring the nation's strong sense of identity and independence. In the face of these tensions, a surge of patriotism swept across Canada, with citizens doubling down on their national pride and resisting external pressures. Provinces began stepping up with their own countermeasures. British Columbia, for instance, pushed back by proposing new taxes on American thermal coal being shipped through BC ports, aligning with environmental concerns that had long been voiced by groups like Dogwood BC. American companies had been exploiting a loophole that allowed them to avoid carbon taxes when shipping thermal coal through Canada, a situation that BC leaders aimed to correct. The Roberts Bank Superport in Delta, British Columbia, home to West Shore Terminals, North America's largest coal export facility, played a pivotal role in this trade, handling both Canadian metallurgical coal and American thermal coal bound for overseas markets. In 2023 alone, the Port of Vancouver processed around 17.6 million metric tons of thermal coal, with roughly two-thirds of that, about 11.7 million metric tons, originating from U.S. states like Montana and Wyoming. Other provinces also took bold action. Ontario ordered the Liquor Control Board to halt the sale of American alcohol, cutting off a lucrative market for U.S. distillers. Quebec followed suit, instructing the Société des Alcools du Québec, SAQ, to remove U.S. spirits from its shelves. Alberta initially hesitated due to its deep trade ties with the U.S. but eventually backed a long-term plan to reduce reliance on American imports. Nova Scotia doubled highway tolls for U.S. vehicles passing through the province and pulled American alcohol from its liquor stores. Meanwhile, Manitoba, Prince Edward Island, and Yukon imposed bans on U.S. liquor imports altogether. The effects of these retaliatory measures rippled across industries. The U.S. auto sector, heavily reliant on Canadian steel and aluminum, faced rising production costs, with vehicles like the Ford F-150 projected to see price hikes due to increased aluminum costs. The electronics, sports equipment, and coal industries also bore the brunt of these tariffs, with supply chains disrupted and prices climbing. Financial markets remained volatile as investors grew increasingly anxious about the economic fallout, while inflationary pressures mounted, straining consumers and businesses alike. As the dust settled, the question lingered: how would these escalating tariffs shape the future of trade between the U.S. and Canada? The path forward remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: the stakes had never been higher for both nations.